You're fired, and we're keeping your laptop." Marcus Chen leaned back in the leather chair that used to be mine, his smirk so wide I could count his veneers. He was 28, fresh MBA, and the nephew of our majority shareholder. 3 weeks at TechCore Industries, and he'd already decided I was expendable. "Security will escort you out. Leave your badge, your access cards, and especially that government-issued laptop." I'd been TechCore's lead security architect for 6 years, built their entire federal contracts division from nothing, spent 18 months getting our DoD clearances, another year developing the encrypted communication system that now ran on military bases across 3 continents. But Marcus had waltzed in with his designer suits and his complete ignorance of what we actually did here, took one look at the salary spreadsheet, and decided I was an unnecessary expense. "The laptop stays," he repeated, extending his hand like I was supposed to just hand over classified government property to someone without clearance. "Company policy. All equipment remains on premises." I placed it carefully on the desk between us. "Sure," I said. My voice was steady, quiet, professional. "But you might want to read the sticker on the bottom first." Marcus's smirk faltered for just a second. He flipped the laptop over, and I watched his face transform from smug satisfaction to confusion to something approaching genuine fear. The sticker was small, official, impossible to miss once you were looking for it. "Property of U.S. government, classified material, unauthorized access federal offense." "What the hell is this?" His voice had climbed half an octave. "Exactly what it says. That's not a TechCore laptop, Marcus. It's on loan from the Department of Defense for my work on the Sentinel project. Access requires TS-SCI clearance, which takes approximately 14 months to obtain, assuming you pass the background check, the polygraph, and the financial audit." I kept my hands folded in my lap, watching him hold it like it had suddenly become radioactive. "Only 3 people in this building have clearance to even touch that device. I'm one of them." The conference room door opened. Marcus jerked like he'd been shocked, nearly dropping the laptop. 2 men in dark suits walked in, badges already out. Federal agents. I'd sent them a message the moment Marcus had called me into this meeting, the moment I'd seen the termination paperwork laid out on the table like a trap he was so proud of setting. "Marcus Chen?" The taller agent's voice was flat, professional, utterly devoid of the courtesy Marcus probably expected. "I'm Special Agent Rodriguez. This is Special Agent Kim. We're here about a potential security breach involving classified government property." Marcus had gone the color of printer paper. "I didn't. I wasn't. She just gave it to me." "You demanded it," I said quietly. "You ordered me to leave it here. You refused to let me take it with me despite my explanation that it was federal property." I'd recorded the whole conversation on my phone. Not that I'd probably need to use it. The building security cameras had captured everything, and Marcus had been too arrogant to think about what he was actually demanding. Agent Rodriguez picked up the laptop with gloved hands, slipping it into an evidence bag. "Mr. Chen, unauthorized possession of classified materials is a federal offense. We're going to need to ask you some questions." "This is insane," Marcus's voice cracked. He whirled toward the door, where Jennifer Park, TechCore's general counsel, had appeared. She looked like she'd aged 5 years in the last 5 minutes. "Jennifer, tell them this is just a misunderstanding. Tell them—" "Be quiet, Marcus." Jennifer's voice was sharp enough to draw blood. She looked at me, and I saw the moment she understood exactly how catastrophically Marcus had screwed up. "Dr. Morrison, I sincerely apologize. This termination is rescinded effective immediately. We had no idea Marcus was planning this action without proper authorization from the board." "The board?" Marcus stared at her like she'd started speaking Sanskrit. "My uncle owns 42% of this company. I have authority to make personnel decisions." "You have authority over the marketing department," Jennifer said, each word dropping like a stone. Dr. Morrison reports directly to the board because she oversees all federal contracts, which represent 68% of TechCore's revenue. Contracts that specifically name her as the lead architect and security officer. Contracts that have clauses requiring her continued employment for the duration of the projects. I watched Marcus's face cycle through several emotions, landing somewhere between sick and panicked. 68%? The Sentinel project alone is a $412 million contract over 5 years, I said. My voice still that same calm, professional tone I'd maintained throughout this disaster, with performance bonuses that could push it past $600 million. The contract has a key personnel clause. Paragraph 14, subsection C. If I'm removed from the project for any reason other than voluntary resignation or termination for cause, the government has the right to cancel the contract and demand repayment of all funds already disbursed. I let that sink in for exactly 3 seconds. We're currently 18 months into the project. They've paid us $147 million so far. The room had gone silent except for Marcus's breathing, which had taken on a wheezing quality. Jennifer had her phone out, typing furiously, probably alerting the board. Probably calling Marcus's uncle to explain how his nephew had just tried to trigger a $147 million clawback clause. There's also the Iron Gate project, I continued, because Marcus needed to understand the full scope of what he'd tried to do. $78 million over 3 years. The Cipher Communications upgrade, $92 million. The base security system overhaul, $206 million over 4 years. I tilted my head slightly, watching him sway on his feet. Every single one of those contracts has my name on it. Every single one requires my continued oversight. You didn't just try to fire me, Marcus. You tried to blow up $750 million in guaranteed revenue. Agent Kim had been making notes. Now he looked up, his expression unreadable. Dr. Morrison, we'll need you to come with us to file a formal report. The laptop will need to be inspected to ensure no unauthorized access occurred. Of course. I stood smoothing down my jacket, professional to the end. Jennifer, I'll need a copy of the termination paperwork for the federal report, and someone should probably check the security logs to see if Marcus accessed any shared drives or systems he wasn't authorized for. Jennifer had gone pale too. Oh God, did he? I locked down all my federal access the moment he called this meeting, but you'll want to audit everything he touched in the last 3 weeks. I picked up my bag, my personal phone, the coffee mug from my desk that I'd grabbed on my way to what I thought was going to be my execution. The DoD takes security violations very seriously, even accidental ones. Marcus had finally found his voice again. This is ridiculous. I didn't know. How was I supposed to know about some stupid sticker? You could have asked, I said simply. You could have reviewed my personnel file before deciding to terminate me. You could have consulted with Jennifer or the board, or literally anyone who understood what I actually do here. I turned toward the agents, ready to leave. You could have spent 5 minutes learning about the company you were making decisions for, instead of assuming you knew everything because your uncle bought you a VP title. The door opened again. This time it was Richard Park, Jennifer's brother and TechCore's CFO. He took one look at the scene, the federal agents, the bagged laptop, Marcus's sweating panic, Jennifer's grim expression, and closed his eyes briefly. How bad? Attempted termination of key personnel on 4 major federal contracts, Jennifer said. Demanded surrender of classified government property. Possible security breach depending on what the DoD investigation turns up. She paused. The board meeting is in 20 minutes. I suggest you prepare a very detailed explanation. Richard's jaw tightened. He looked at me, and I saw something like genuine regret in his eyes. Dr. Morrison, I am so sorry. This should never have happened. No, I agreed. It shouldn't have. I glanced at Marcus, who was now sitting down, his head in his hands. But it did. And now you get to explain to your investors why you hired someone who nearly destroyed the company in less than a month. Agent Rodriguez gestured toward the door. Dr. Morrison, if you're ready? I walked out of that conference room with my head high, the federal agents flanking me like an honor guard. Behind me, I could hear Marcus starting to argue again, his voice climbing toward hysteria, and Jennifer cutting him off with words that sounded like they had lawsuit written all over them. The marketing department's open office plan meant everyone had a clear view of me leaving with federal agents, and I saw phones coming out, messages being sent. By the time we reached the elevator, the whole building would know what happened. The investigation took 4 hours. I walked them through every security protocol, every access log, every piece of classified material that Marcus could have potentially compromised by demanding I leave the laptop. Agent Rodriguez was thorough, professional, and increasingly convinced that Marcus had created a genuine security incident through sheer ignorance and arrogance. When they finally cleared me to leave, it was almost 7 p.m., and my phone had 63 missed calls. 40 of them were from Jennifer, 10 from Richard, 8 from board members whose names I recognized from quarterly reports, 5 from Marcus's uncle, Thomas Chen, the majority shareholder who'd gifted his incompetent nephew a VP position like it was a graduation present. I called Jennifer back first. She answered on the first ring. Dr. Morrison, thank God. Are you all right? The agents? They said, I'm fine. The laptop is secure. No breach occurred because I locked everything down before the meeting. I walked toward my car, exhausted and oddly calm. What's the damage? Jennifer's laugh was bitter. Marcus has been placed on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation. Thomas is threatening to pull his investment unless we reinstate him. The board is threatening to force Thomas out if he tries to interfere with personnel decisions again. 3 of our federal contracts officers are demanding written assurance that you're still on the projects, and the DoD sent an official inquiry about our security protocols and hiring practices. Sounds like a fun evening for everyone. I unlocked my car, slid into the driver's seat. What do you need from me? Honestly, we need you to not quit. Jennifer's voice was strained. I know we have no right to ask. I know Marcus humiliated you, and the company failed to protect you from this disaster. But if you leave now, we lose everything. Not just the federal contracts, our reputation, our credibility, our future in the defense sector. Everything. I sat there in the parking garage, listening to the echo of car engines and distant voices. Part of me wanted to walk away, let TechCore collapse under the weight of its own dysfunction, find a company that actually valued expertise over nepotism. But I'd built those projects from nothing. Hired the teams, designed the systems, fought through years of bureaucracy and security clearances to make them real. They were mine in a way that transcended employment contracts and corporate politics. I want Marcus gone, I said finally. Not suspended, not reassigned. Gone. If he's still with the company in any capacity, I walk. Done. Jennifer didn't even hesitate. The board is voting on it tonight. Thomas can scream all he wants, but his nephew just cost us millions in legal fees and endangered our most valuable contracts. He's finished. I want a seat on the board. That one surprised even me, but once I said it, I knew it was right. If I'm responsible for 3/4 of your revenue, I should have a voice in how the company operates. Silence. Then, I'll bring it to the vote. I think you'll get it. After today, I think you'll get anything you ask for. And I want final approval on any new hires in the Federal Contracts Division. No more surprise VPs who don't know the first thing about classified work. Absolutely. Anything else? I thought about Marcus's smirk, his casual cruelty, his absolute certainty that he could do whatever he wanted because his uncle wrote the checks. I thought about the laptop on the desk, the sticker he'd never bothered to read, the disaster he'd triggered through sheer arrogance. I want a company-wide training on security protocols and the consequences of violating them. Everyone from the CEO to the janitors. If we're going to work with classified materials, everyone needs to understand what that means. I'll set it up personally. Jennifer paused. Dr. Morrison, I really am sorry. We should have protected you better. We should have seen what Marcus was doing before it got this far. Yes, I agreed. You should have. But you're fixing it now. That counts for something. I hung up and sat in the car for another 10 minutes, letting the adrenaline drain away, feeling the weight of what had almost happened settle on my shoulders. Marcus had tried to destroy me, and in the process, he'd nearly destroyed the entire company. All because he'd looked at a salary number and made assumptions. All because he'd never bothered to understand what I actually did or why it mattered. My phone buzzed. A text from Richard. Board voted unanimously. Marcus terminated for cause, effective immediately. Thomas has withdrawn his opposition. We're announcing your board seat tomorrow morning. Thank you for staying. Another text. This one from the Sentinel project manager at the DoD. Heard about the incident. Status of project? I typed back quickly. Secure, no breach, proceeding on schedule. His response was almost instant. Good. We'd have hated to lose you. You're the best in the business. I started the car and drove home through rush hour traffic, exhausted and oddly triumphant. Tomorrow I'd go back to Tech Corps, this time as a board member, with the power to make sure nothing like this ever happened again. Tomorrow, I'd start rebuilding trust with the federal agencies that trusted us with their most sensitive projects. Tomorrow, I'd begin the process of turning this disaster into something that made the company stronger. But tonight I allowed myself a small private smile. Marcus had called me into that meeting expecting to humiliate me, to throw me out like I was nothing. Instead, he'd walked into a trap of his own making, one baited with his own ignorance and arrogance. He'd demanded I hand over classified government property, and I'd let him take it, knowing exactly what would happen when those federal agents walked through the door. Sometimes the best revenge is just stepping back and letting someone destroy themselves. Sometimes all you have to do is hand them the rope and watch them tie the knot. Marcus had thought he was firing me. Instead, he'd handed me the keys to the kingdom and thrown himself out the window. I pulled into my driveway and sat there for a moment, looking at my house, my sanctuary, the place I'd almost lost because some entitled VP thought he knew better. My phone buzzed one more time. Thomas Chen, leaving a voicemail. I didn't listen to it. Whatever he had to say, whatever apologies or threats or justifications he wanted to offer, I didn't need to hear them. I had won. Not through revenge or spite or escalation, but through simple, undeniable fact. I was valuable. My work mattered. And anyone who tried to throw me away without understanding that would learn, as Marcus had learned, that some people are too important to fire. Some expertise is too critical to dismiss. Some stickers on the bottom of laptops are warnings that should never be ignored. The federal investigation would continue for weeks, probably months. Marcus would face potential charges for mishandling classified materials, though his lawyer would probably argue ignorance and get him off with fines and probation. Tech Corps would spend a fortune on legal fees and security audits and damage control. Thomas Chen would probably never speak to me again, which was fine, because I'd never needed his approval anyway. But the contracts would continue. The projects would launch on schedule. The systems I'd built would protect people I'd never meet, in places I'd never go, doing work that would never be acknowledged publicly. That was enough. That had always been enough. I got out of the car, locked it, walked to my front door with my head high and my conscience clear. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles, new idiots who thought expertise was replaceable and specialized knowledge was just expensive overhead. But tonight I'd sleep well, knowing that when the moment came, when Marcus demanded that laptop and I handed it over, I'd given him exactly what he deserved. The truth, the consequences, the lesson he'd never forget. You can fire someone, You can humiliate them. You can treat them like they're disposable, and their years of work mean nothing. But you can't escape the reality of what they actually do. You can't wish away the contracts that depend on them, the clearances that took years to obtain, the expertise that can't be replaced with arrogance and an MBA. Marcus learned that lesson the hard way, with federal agents and a $147 million sword hanging over his head. TechCore learned it too, in board meetings and emergency votes and hasty apologies. And tomorrow, when I walked back into that building as a board member instead of just an employee, they'd all remember what happens when you underestimate someone just because you don't understand their value. The laptop had a sticker. Marcus never bothered to read it. That was all it took to change everything.